Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 36th session from Mahamudra for the People. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope everyone's doing well, and I know the weather has been problematic for a lot of people. So I'll take a moment to just offer some positive energy around that. Also, before we begin or go any further, maybe we can just take a moment to settle into this particular space that we're sharing. And if we can, take a moment to just call to mind why it is that we're practicing Dharma. And coming back to why it is that we connect with the work of developing the awakened mind. What about that is important? What about our story brought us to this moment? And also taking a little bit of time to recognize how unique it is that we've all come together in this way. People from all over the US and from Europe and other locations. And then taking a moment to privately take refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, however they arise for you. And so that can be the historical Buddha or cosmic Buddha, the Dharma being the precious teachings that liberate, whether they be sutra or tantra. And the Sangha, either the ordained Sangha or the community of like-minded practitioners, the Bhumisparsha Sangha, for example, the larger Vajrayana, Tantric Buddhist Sangha, Karmakagyu Sangha, however it is that you identify. Also, maybe just for this opening session, take a moment to find one thing to be grateful for. We go through our day rushing, going this way and that way, moving in a speedy fashion, generally only looking out for our own interests. Sometimes it's helpful to slow down and remember the gratitude we might feel for the most simple things. A pint glass of tea. Gratitude for that. And gratitude for being here with you. Gratitude for Dharma. Gratitude for my teachers. Gratitude for my family that support me. And take a moment to really let your heart open up to gratitude. What that looks like, feels like for you. And this is particularly important for the practice of Mahamudra because Mahamudra is a very difficult practice to engage in when our heart is small and hard, when we feel separate from others, when we're in a defensive position, when we're experiencing conflict, either conflict of our own making or conflict that we might experience from other people. In that place of reactive smallness, the natural ease of Mahamudra is quite difficult. And this is why devotion is categorized as an essential part of the practice, not necessarily devotion to a particular human being, but a sense of openness, a sense of joy, a sense of gratitude, a sense of relationship. And it's so easy, especially as Americans. I can speak about this because I'm American. For Americans, we seem to really thrive off of conflict, thrive off of fighting, thrive off of pitting ourselves against others, pitting ourselves against systems. And sometimes we need to massage our heart center so they can open up. So that that tightness that separates us can melt away a little bit. Mahamudra can also get quite heady, nature of mind this and nature of thought that. What is the difference between this and that? Mind still, or some other thing. But it's also a very embodied practice, which means that we can't only be in our head, can't always be just examining, analyzing. We just need to be. And being is hard when we're tight. Pure being is exceptionally hard when we find ourselves in a defensive position. So in a moment, we'll begin a little bit of practice, a little sitting practice for maybe 12 minutes or so. You're probably trying to allow yourself to open up like a lotus blossom. Or like the smile of a child. Like a cool breeze on a hot day. Or a warm bath on a cold day. Let us remember to keep our practice embodied. And get out of this hard, thick skull that reifies everything, that makes a big deal out of everything, chases controversy, worries about quality control. Just let it all go. It's not going to disappear. And so we'll spend about 12 minutes sitting. And again, just come back to the basic instruction that suits you in this moment, relying upon whatever anchor it is that feels meaningful to you, whether it be the breath, whether it be a visualized object, whether it be an actual physical object, space, whether it be awareness itself, whatever it is, allow yourself to settle into this moment. And we'll sit like this for 12 minutes. And slowly bring yourself back to this group. So, as we've been doing, please feel free to ask a question at any point in time, either from the Ask a Question tab on the bottom of the page, or in the text box, where the thread is on the side of the page. And I will continue where I left off. I've come up as text called Pointing Out the Dharmakaya, the quintessential Amrita, clarifying the torch of the essential instruction on co-emergent Mahamudra. So last week, we covered the practice of looking at the mind while there are appearances, and I kind of gave a brief run through of looking at the moving mind. Before I go any further, first off, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and ask questions now, or at any point that feels comfortable. It's important to remember that even though we're going through these instructions more or less, one a week, in some cases, 2 in one session, that we may be best benefited to take our time in engaging these, right? So I guess what I mean to say is that, for example, with the last instruction, looking at the mind while there are appearances, or in relationship to the way appearance arises, that we don't have to put pressure on ourselves to think that we need to master this aspect of the practice over the course of 1 week. Just so that people feel that all of this is manageable. Again, this practice of Mahamudra really is about a practice of coming into an experience of ease, and all of the aspects of Vipassana practice are kind of predicated on the fact that there's some stability with respect to the practice of shamatha. And so if it seems as if the practice of shamatha is not particularly stable in this moment, then by all means, focus on that, and then come back to these instructions, when you can. Everything here is recorded, so there'll be access to it, at all times. Moving forward, it's, pretty important that we don't end up finding ourselves in a place where there is excessive pressure that we're putting on ourselves, right? Anything that kind of brings us back to this tension, or the fact that maybe we've bitten off more than we can chew, because that leads to negative associations with practice, that can be, it just kind of builds up and disincentivizes us from, wanting to go deeper, or even, continue the practice, so to speak. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Yes, these aren't chores to be done. So there are 2 questions that I'll address now. So Jan writes, when trying to practice Vipassana by asking questions during meditation, several of the questions trigger a modern scientific answer in my mind. When asking, where do appearances meet awareness, I might think of light bundles reflecting on objects and then reaching receptors in my eye, generating nerve impulses and so forth. this idea that I already know the scientific answer seems to block my practice. Any suggestions? So yeah, I think this is a really nice question, and it kind of forces us to come back to the remembrance of treating our Vipassana practice very lightly. Right? So Vipassana in this context is not, we're not treating it as an analytic meditation necessarily, even though to some extent, it has qualities that do appear to be analytic. The best way of kind of going about this is to allow the quote unquote question that's being asked to be less of a question, right? Less of a kind of didactic kind of question and more of a light curiosity, right? So when we have the experience of an appearance right before us, which, so right now I'm focusing on this wall of books that's in front of me, and there's one book in particular, kind of, that's an anchor within the context of engaging appearance. Rather than ask an actual question, it can be helpful to just allow ourselves to be naturally curious in a non-narrative manner around how appearance arises. Just resting into the experience of mind and where mind meets phenomenon, if mind meets phenomenon. When we come back to asking this in a way that's conceptual, then it's almost as if we get a conceptual answer back, and then we're sitting, then we just end up sitting in thought. I think this is why I tend to use the term, and I don't know if it makes sense, and I'm sorry if it doesn't, or if I'm unclear, but trying to avoid a call and response kind of relationship to the inquiry that arises, right? So call and response being, one says something and then something comes back, says something, comes back, right? So, what, for example, sound, right? You right now, presumably you can hear my voice. I can hear my voice. I hear sounds, coming from outside of the room where I am. I'm sure there are sounds somewhere in the vicinity that are not my voice where you are. And allowing ourselves to engage with the experience of sound, right? And to get a more clear experience of how sound arises with respect to mind. But we don't necessarily need to focus on, does mind penetrate sound? Does sound penetrate mind? In terms of asking those questions, we can just rest into the experience of the sound. It's palpable. Same with temperature. The same with smell. Same with light. And same with color. All we're doing is resting into the experience of the mind's ability to be aware. Right? This knowing. And so we're not engaging in an analytic process of asking, well, where does mind in this book meet? Does mind just touch the surface of the spine of the book? And then there's book, everything else is mind? we can achieve a very similar kind of equivalency, I guess you could say, by just resting into the experience of appearance. And in doing that, the answer comes. Right? The answer comes to us. It's not, we could say it's wisdom born of practice, not kind of, intellectual understanding in the moment. Right? So if we let the practice guide us and put away the need to have to guide the practice through our question, I think there's benefit in that. So hopefully that's helpful and clear. If it's not, let me know and I'll try and clarify that some more. So Travis asks, related to your opening remarks, how would you describe the relationship between bodhicitta and Mahamudra? Sometimes I wonder if I should consciously bring attention to the heart during sitting practice, or if doing so is contrary to not altering the experience. Yeah, so I mean, that's another really good question. I think there are a couple things we could do. I mean, before a meditation session, we could recite aspiration prayers, all sorts of prayers to help kind of just generate this experience of openness. The other thing too, though, is that it can be helpful sometimes, like I said in relationship to the last question, to let the practice guide us, to let the experience guide us, right? And so, for example, with respect to practicing with appearance, right? In order to really open up to the experience of appearance arising, whether it's something physical in front of us, or whether it's appearance related to other senses, to really rest into that that direct experience, one needs to be open anyway, right? And so the practice has a way of naturally opening us up, right? It's very hard to be intimate with sound, sight, and everything that arises in our experience without being soft and open, right? And operating from a place of almost tenderness, right? Because ultimately what we're doing is we're resting into direct, radically free relationship with all things. And we can't do that with a a resentment for all things. That almost just like energetically kind of pulls us back. Right? So on one level, it can be helpful to trust the practice and allow the practice to guide us into just that process of opening. But of course, it doesn't hurt at all to implement a bit of a willful injection of devotion or of bodhicitta, or of a sense of being open and connected through prayer, through visualization before the practice. In the practice itself, just as with the first question, we're trying to rest into the direct experience of mind without kind of worrying too much about concepts, right? And so then if we're worried about, oh man, is my heart center open, then, we're really, all we're experiencing in that moment is the moving mind, as it were. So we could practice with that, But again, even the process of shamatha, like, that kind of stabilization of the experience of mind, that as well arises very naturally with a lot less effort when our heart is open. So there's a faith through trust. Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a reasonable thing. I mean, the unfortunately, um, Dharma practice uh, um, requires us to have faith or trust, right? I mean, it's not in the sense that, you can't practice Dharma without having faith or trust, and that it's all predicated on faith or trust. But at some point, we have to let go of our hardness. I mean, in many ways, and not just one. Um, in I think we could say most specifically, um, the ultimate hardness, right, that we experience is being trapped in concept, right? Being trapped in the world of ideas, being reactive to, and all of that. Then the other side is that really, like, there's nothing to worry about. They're really, in the practice of Mahamudra, there is nothing to worry about. Everything is okay. Resting into everything being okay. Resting into direct, open, easy presence. And there's this quote. I've never seen the original kind of context for it, but it's attributed to Trungpa Rinpoche about being, America being characterized, or the West being characterized by speed and aggression. And I would add to speed and aggression, depression and anxiety. We are zooming around all the time. We tend to have on average, a pretty brusque relationship with anything that kind of gets in our way, right? Anything that gets in our way is a problem, an obstacle, something that needs to be removed, right? And this is why protector practice gets a little funky sometimes for people, because, we automatically assume that we just need to, like, plow through those things that are in the way. And that, on one level you could do that, but it's not really necessarily the most skillful thing. Right? And then with the depression, anxiety, I mean, depression tends to be, like a very deep and subtle kind of aggression or anger that we end up focusing on ourselves. And anxiety relates to this speed and aggression. I mean, we have a very, and I'm guilty of this myself too, like, unrealistic relationship to time, unrealistic relationship to productivity. And we live in a capitalist culture that really, has an impact on a lot of the ways in which, we find ourselves arising in the moment. And this piece around anxiety in our practice really has to be looked at as well, right? So can we allow ourselves to open our heart up to complete relaxation? And so this kind of brings us back to Tulopa's, sixth nail, just to relax and to rest into the experience of mind. But to relax with ease. I've brought this up, I think, in other contexts, and there's a meditation instruction that kind of relates to bringing the practice of Mahamudra to another practice. And the instruction is to rest like a bee stuck in honey, or to rest like a laborer, or a worker after a hard day of labor. And it's just sitting down and having that deep sense of relaxation, deep sense of, I've done my work. Now I don't need to do anything. or the bee stuck in honey. The bee is flying around and it finds itself, maybe its wings and body gets stuck, and there's nothing it can do. There's just stillness. So Mahamudra is not something that can be forced. It's not something that we can make happen by will. So Melissa asked a question I want to get to before I go any further. So Melissa writes, based on last week's teachings, I think I was misunderstanding some things about this practice. While practicing, I was applying Tilopa 6 nails as antidotes. Is it best to be familiar with them, but during practice to simply return to mind as pond and ripples, as you suggested, or do we actively think of and apply the 6 nails during practice? Tilopa 6 nails and bringing them into practice is a tricky thing. The practice itself, the 6 kind of instructions are amazingly beautiful because of their brevity. And yet, we can't enter into the practice using this as a gel that we're kind of placing over everything, right? So when we say, rather than do something like even like chanting, like, may I be free of, the past, may I be free of the future, may I be free of any concept of this particular moment right now, right? There's a difference between saying that and a difference between cultivating that and just resting into that experience. And again, this has a lot to do with giving ourselves permission to let go of the mind that grasps. And this mind that grasps tends to be rooted in conflict of some kind. And so the conflict can be a more internal conflict, conflict around anxiety, right? Not being able to be totally at ease or trust, the present moment. So in that way, it becomes important for us to then experience what it is, what it feels like to rest in the moment, giving up all attachment to past experience. The nature of this experience is free of the 3 times. So we don't have to necessarily engage in remembering that this also includes freedom from anticipation or anticipatory stress with respect to the future. The mind is beyond time. And if we've begun to experience a little bit of stability with respect to the past and with respect to the future, then this particular moment doesn't become, such a big deal after all anyway, which is what that instruction is about. The practice of not engaging in preference, right, of things having to be a particular way or preferred experience isn't something we need to necessarily cultivate. When the mind settles, we're able to experience that as it is. To have preference actually becomes something that you can, you really feel the kind of disturbance that creates. Oh, no, I don't want to have that experience, that thought, that whatever. The moment we're like, no, or yes, give me more of that. We can feel like, how, the lens has shifted, right? trying to visualize this, from the perspective of some kind of like photographic process or telescopic process. Letting go of the need to do anything or control. That too is hard when we're plagued with anxiety or speed, aggression, just letting it go. So in one way, like Philippa's 6 nails can be best looked at like this. Piece of paper here. What is going on here? Yeah, so I've got a piece of paper I can mangle. So this is Philippa's 6 nails, perhaps. It's not really, but just take Philippa's 6 nails as you engage it and let it go. Again, it won't go anywhere. You're not going to go to hell because you just dropped it. But allow yourself to drop, the instruction itself. This is why this practice is beautifully simple, but then also very hard when we don't have faith in our ability to rest into the experience. And so this is another place where the faith and trust is important. So this also kind of connects then to Buddha nature, right? Like if we can talk all about Buddha nature and read all about Buddha nature and, read the Uttara Tantra and, kind of get a sense of it, from there and other places. But having faith and trust in it, having faith and trust in our basic goodness, or, to quote Trungpa, our basic sanity is part of this as well. We don't need to add anything to that which is already perfect. We don't need to add an instruction or a conceptual kind of, tool to something that is able to naturally rest in and of itself. Yes, we've gotten a little, maybe out of relationship, we could say, over time, but that's okay. There's no real original sin, in this. In fact, we could say the only thing there is original wakefulness, right? Original awareness. So all we're doing is settling down into that. Right? And of course, it's not, that it sounds very simple and simplistic in a way, like that is a pith instruction. And then, of course, because we have a complicated relationship to mind and being able to just rest and let go and have faith in it being perfect, then it requires a little bit of effort on our part to train in getting naked, so to speak. And I think that's another kind of good, helpful way of looking at this is, to train in our original wakefulness. This kind of goes back to the relationship between ground, path, and fruit. Essentially, there's no difference between the three of them. One is the ground of the mind, the ground of experience. The path is learning how to just practice right into that. Have trust, have faith. And then the fruit is basically the ground realized. Yeah, we are becoming clear light strippers. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, in Kunga, I agree. I'd prefer to be stuck in honey than samsara. And so Payne asks, can you smash the way mind becomes another concept? Karmapa's words are, mind is no mind, are on my mind. So yeah, I think sometimes like the hard thing is like we talk too much and read too much and think too much about this stuff, right? Like mind is a lot of different things, and depending on what we're looking at, you could almost say that there are a lot of different kinds of experience of mind. You know, there's conceptual mind, there's this kind of rational mind, analytic mind, there's mind itself in the kind of big kind of Zen kind of way, or Dharmakaya, or Dharmata, right? Mind is essentially open, spacious awareness, right? And then we get caught into this, like, uh, just, you know, feedback loop of thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. A lot of, things come up, right? Oh, am I doing 6 nails right? Oh, am I doing them in order? Oh, did I make a mistake? Oh, this, oh, that. Oh, like, where is mind meeting, this external object? Oh, is that external object external, or is everything experience of mind? And just this machination just takes over, right? And so what Karmapa is saying here is mind is no mind. Mind is freedom. Mind is vast. Mind is limitless. Mind is expansive. Mind is awareness. Mind extends beyond time. So I think at one level, like, it's not the fault of the translation. I think it's the fault of the way, what we do when we see that word mind. We think of cognition, right? That's not what mind is. You know. So letting go of that too, letting go of words. Letting go of, and two, I mean, I don't mean any disrespect for anybody or any particular tradition when I say this, but I think that kind of contemporary vipassana, where there are exercises and labeling, has this kind of potential problematic aspect where rather than labeling, labeling kind of denotes like individual experience of each particular thing and labeling it, and it is thus classified. Having been classified, we're still engaging in concept. And so this kind of vipassana is not looking at that labeling. This kind of vipassana is looking at the essence of mind experience. The essence of mind experience when the mind is still, the essence of mind experience when the mind is moving, the essence of mind experience when perceiving external appearance or phenomena, and then in a little bit, the essence of mind experience while looking at body, right, our own body. So if we can, I also think that this is why, like, my root teacher, who, one of her main practices was Mahamudra, was, if you need to read and forget. If you need to get involved in the concepts, behind things, just do it real quick and don't get heady about it. trust into the process. Trust the process. Trust our mind. Trust the fact that our mind is oriented towards awakening. Right? It's not this like messed up thing that we have to wrestle and it's not that it's inherently negative. It's not that it's a problem. It's not that you're a problem. It's not that I'm a problem. It's just that we cling. It's this attachment and aversion and ignorance, like the three poisons. In the moment when we experience, meditation, right, or even begin to look at the concept of mind, where does attachment, aversion, and ignorance arise? Can we just let things go? Can we let, the part of us that's quality control oriented go? Can we let fear go? Can we let ideas about all of this go and just be? I was reading a meditation text, commentary on one by this Kempo, and this everything was just, the philosophical aspect of kind of non-conceptual meditation. And it was just so, it was a real shame for me because I just don't connect to that. And I'm not saying I'm, good at anything, but it just felt like a missed opportunity. Just let it go. We don't need to, we don't need to fool ourselves into being, particularly brilliant. Yeah. Okay. So, hopefully that stuff is all helpful. Let me know if it's not. So, okay, so now we're going to look into the next instruction. So looking at the body and mind as the same or different. And so Ninth Karmapa starts off with a question. Well, are the body and the mind same or different? As for them being the same, the body which is born and dies, and the mind which is not born and does not die, are not the same. Not only that, but the material body and the knowing mind are two and not the same. If they were the same, when the body dies, the mind would also die. When your body is pricked by a thorn, the mind would also be pricked. As for them being different, when a thorn pricks the body, which one senses it? The body or the mind? If only the body senses it, even a corpse would have feeling. If the mind senses it, and the body and mind are different, then if pain arises in the body and is sensed by the mind, it would follow that even if earth and stones were damaged, pain would arise in the mind. But that does not happen. Therefore, look properly, knowing that all sensations that arise are like water and waves. Look. So, there was this a story that was included, I mentioned in modern tantric Buddhism, about a Zen teacher who I came to be. They came onto the hospice service that I was working for, and I went to go meet with them, and yeah, the long and short of it is that they were at the end of life, going through all of the kind of typical kind of experiences that one finds, right? There's making sense of the fact that one is going to die. There's the process of going through life review to kind of examine what this experience has been like. This particular person, though, also suffered from tremendous amount of physical pain, given the nature of their illness. They had spinal issues, and there was also cancer that ended up settling into the spine. So it was very uncomfortable for them to sit, very uncomfortable to lie down. There wasn't a lot of room for just being at ease. Right? And so this person was also very hesitant to receive morphine because they, being a practitioner, really valued clarity of mind, and viewed kind of the experience of perhaps being foggy as a result of taking morphine as more undesirable kind of experience than they wanted. And there had been a debate about this. I remember reading, it was either in the first issue of Tricycle or the first year that Tricycle came out. It was very fascinating, and I kind of experienced this a little bit when my root teacher was quite sick. She was quite sick, and this other Ani, who she knew very well, was also quite sick. The other Ani had, I believe it was brain cancer, and her medication really kind of knocked her out. So as a relatively young practitioner, this kind of conceptual background around how problematic it can be to enter into the dying phase with a mind that's cloudy was really, really real for me. And so, I sat with this this Zen teacher who actually had been a student of Dudjom Rinpoche for a little bit before embracing Zen. I think that they'd even done Nundro under him. And did a little medicine Buddha practice together, and then just sat in shamatha. And at the time, the pain was quite difficult. This person couldn't focus. And makes sense, right? I don't suffer from chronic pain, but I have been, I've experienced illness, that has been accompanied with tremendous pain. So I'm a little familiar with that. Now, it became clear that this person was going to have to take morphine. The pain was just too much, right? And I met to kind of soothe them. I could meet with the nurse, discuss all their fears and anxieties around it. And then the next time I came back, a couple of days later, they had been, taking morphine. It was sublingual, and they were really depressed, and kind of defeated. And I was like, well, yeah, what's going on now? And they were like, well, now I have to take morphine, and it was as if the assumption was that, I'm basically screwed, there's nowhere to go from here, my mind is kind of hazy, foggy. And so I asked if we could sit together and for not very long, 10, 15 minutes. And while we were sitting, it was basically just shamatha, right? Bringing, sense of awareness to the particular moment, focusing a little bit on allowing experience to just arise, right? Not chase it, not interact, not get wrapped up in stuff. And as we were finishing, right before, I ended up asking them if there was any difference between awareness and mind. And this person who had been plagued about there being basically no difference, right? If mind was foggy, everything was foggy, was able to experience in that moment that maybe there is a difference, right? There was an aspect of clear knowing, right, that they had in that moment that allowed them to recognize the feeling of fogginess. But that knowing quality was alert, fast, like a hawk or a vulture, soaring up, in the sky, soaring in the expansiveness, the ability to know, the ability to recognize. And so there was a very palpable difference for this person, and that they noticed kind of for the first time, at that time, or maybe they were reminded, of another experience where they had that sense of clarity, right? And so, when Karmapa talks about, right here, um, if body and mind were the same, when the body dies, the mind would also die. Right? Even as we die, the initial phases of death, there's still awareness, sometimes for a couple days after death, right? According to the tradition. But even in terms of the way the tradition relates to and teaches on especially mind in relationship to death. And so then we can't then therefore overly equate mind with body, definitely. But then maybe mind and awareness have a different kind of relationship than we tend to assume. And I'm just throwing that out there for people to play with. Right? But so what this is getting at, what this particular instruction is getting at, is, what is the matrix of experience? Or where is the matrix of experience? Is it solely body? Is it solely mind? Is there a relationship between the two? They're not the same, right? The body which is born and dies is not the same as the mind which is not born and does not die. Exactly. Pain asks why the two, why the same? Exactly. So as we can see with this instruction, the wisdom gained from this instruction has to experientially be distilled from this process of understanding through experimentation, right? The experimentation being our practice. around where the matrix of experience lay, or what the experience of the matrix of experience may be. We tend, in our kind of hardest times, to make the body be the recipient of everything. Right? But that's also because we're kind of like, running through life, speed, aggression, anxiety, and depression, with our kind of fast, active mind, going this way and that way, and oh, I stubbed my toe, I burned my hand, I blah blah blah, I. Somebody said that to me, and I feel it in my body, and and it just propagates the split. So, Melissa, does awareness see the body as awareness? And then Payne asks, what awareness is aware of? What awareness is aware of awareness, be of anything that is other than awareness beyond awareness? So again, these are not for me to answer. These are the questions that have to be resolved in the practice. And so this is why Karmapa says, knowing that all sensations that arise are like water and waves, look. Look properly. As for body and mind being different, when a thorn pricks the body, which one senses it, the body or the mind? If only the body senses it, even a corpse would have feeling. If the mind senses it and the body and mind are different, then pain arises in the body and is sensed by the mind. It would follow that even if earth and stones were damaged, pain would arise in the mind because of the nature of mind. So a helpful kind of maybe more modern kind of interpretation of what these instructions are like are koans. Right? So it's not about, well, I went to the Lama and the Lama told me the answer is 5. Because what would you do with that information anyway? If I said, whatever the answer is, that's not helpful at all. That's part of the problem. We already have that problem because we know the mind is vast and luminous and limitless and spacious and every other descriptor that is used, right, both in Sanskrit or in Tibetan in translation or in English in translation, right? So we have the descriptors already there, but that still does not give us the experience. The only way the experience can happen is through engaging the practice. And so that's why in this particular moment, practicing with this instruction, the relationship between body and mind. And all this is looking to see if they're same or different. And so I invite people to explore this so that we can begin to kind of, distill this. Well, so Jan writes, I find it a bit frustrating at times that we are told that we have to experience everything through practice, but at the same time we are given the answers, which seems self-evident, at least as long as you keep a Buddhist worldview. Yeah, I totally get the frustration. And again, the answer, being given an answer, is not the same as living the experience. That's just the way it is. I can tell you the same way we can look in all sorts of texts about the nature of mind. You can read, Longchenpa, uh, you know, um, offers incredibly beautiful and insightful and clear instructions on on the nature of mind. Right? They're beautiful. They're transporting. It's as if you're receiving pointing out instructions directly from him. And yet, unless one has the experience, it's not the same. You know, um, I can tell you how to get to the Kankaleshwari Kali temple from Bodh Gaya, right? And you can know by looking on the map. But actually going through the eastern coalfields of India and seeing what that is like, and then seeing how the environment, the land, the landscape changes as you enter into West Bengal is a totally different experience. Getting into this, town that had been, one of the kind of summer getaway capitals from Calcutta is another evocative experience. And then one finds the temple there. I know that people come to the practice of, meditation and the practice, of Dharma for answers. But really, it's not about the answers, it's about the experience. And so, Karmapa points out in the Mahamudra aspiration prayer, and it's pointed out in other places as well, that you can't, at some point words fail. And we use them as best we can, but at best they're kind of clunky, average kinds of representations of the knowledge itself, but just symbolic representation. It's not the same. You know. So I definitely, commiserate with you, Jan, in your experience of frustration. And, then there's just the process of opening up with faith and trust and coming back to the meditation. And this is how we gain the kind of distilled wisdom that is in, these kind of, practices. It's like that, experience of epiphany. When we finally realize something, we might know, somebody loves us. We might know that people care about us, but it isn't until there's a demonstration. That demonstration in moments of need, in particular, really just cause that experience to kind of pop, and it goes from something that is, known to experienced, and there is a difference between those. Yeah, I mean, so there is an aspect of our, conceptual mind that tends towards grasping. We're grasping for the answer, grasping for the liberation, grasping for the ice cream. And the practice, even like with Padampa Sangye's, instruction pain that you brought up there, that illness and pain are a treasury of bliss. conceptually, you could be like, yeah, okay, like I understand that like illness and pain are a powerful place to bring practice, and if I do that, then I'll be able to, engage in the wisdom that arises from that. Right? But then it's a totally different thing to practice into that illness and pain, the treasury of bliss. Like, what is he talking about? You know, I know some here, have like real experience with pain, right? And so it's nothing to minimize, right? It's real, and how that pain becomes then engaged in as part of practice becomes special instruction. Right? It's not a joke. Pain is not a joke. Illness too. There was I think it was Golatzawa. I'm pretty sure it was him. Was he apparently enjoyed getting sick because that would give him these opportunities to really practice with his fear and his anxiety, and he's at times living in a cave, pretty high up on a cliff face. And so it's not like you could go to the pharmacy to go get, Motrin or Advil or Tylenol, right? No cough syrup, right? It's basically a pretty rustic place. And if you get sick and you don't have what you need, right, you could get more sick. Right? It could become quite bad, right? So an illness can actually become progressively worse in those situations. And for him, he related that the amount of clinging that arose, clinging to his life, clinging to his comfort, the aversion to pain, the aversion to discomfort, would arise very, strongly, right? As it does for us as well. And there's a song that he wrote where he, indicated that this is a experience he craves, because that is the place where he gets to meet these, demons, so to speak, of clinging and self-cherishing, and to be able to rest into practice, to be able to really understand what's being experienced in the moment, right? And not our reactivity, not our projections, not our fear, not our anxiety, not our depression, not our anger, and to just rest. Becomes part of that practice. It is very hard to do. Yes. Margaritas are the best of samsara. I agree. Right? And yet, again, this, being able to, we don't have to run full, force into pain and death and, intensity like that. We can begin to understand, even with just basic, much more simple sensations, right? Oh, a cat sitting on your lap, assuming you're not allergic. The experience of their purring, right? Their softness, their affection, right? And so encountering that, how is that experienced? How does body and mind relate to that experience? Drinking tea, which I love to do, taste. Sensation, how does the taste change, as we begin to drink? Sound. Really allowing ourselves to get to know this well. I mean, that's what it is. So pain, what do you mean? Yeah, direct experience, just as it is. In the Zen, in the Zen world, like, Huang Po and Hui Neng would just say nothing special. It just is. And we don't need to make such a big deal. And again, yeah, you can read Huang Po, you can read Hui Neng, you can read Padampa Sangye, you can read everybody. You can read, yes, Mimosa especially, yes, before they're imputed. So the direct experience. Because it is after things are imputed that's where then it enters into the realm of our conceptual reactivity, right? Wow, man, like, but this cat smells, man. Or, the next thing they're going to do is start, like, clawing at something, and all of a sudden we're not, where are we? Like, what experience is being had in that moment? Right? The basic act of just letting go is challenging. And again, within all of this, it's also important to recognize that some of these instructions will be easier than others, and some will be easier for some people and harder for others. Like, it's not, first of all, it's not a test. Second of all, everything changes. An instruction that might be hard at first will become easy. An experience that, or an instruction that was easy on a particular day might be hard. And that's okay. But just, letting everything go, getting loose, getting free, is a really important part of this part of practice. So, I think I'll pause here to not go over time. I really want to thank everyone for attending this session and for your engagement and your practice in this particular moment. I ask that any benefit from this session be dedicated to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. I ask that any merit from this practice help all sentient beings to understand the nature of mind, and to be able to, more than understand it intellectually, to be able to experience it, so that they can be open, experience everything, including themselves, directly, so that all confusion begins to dry up, leaving nothing but clear view. So, thank you all. Take care of yourselves and have a good weekend, and stay warm and dry.